الحمد لله وكفى والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والذين جاهدوا فينا لنهدينهم سبلنا سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. On one occasion, the Prophet ﷺ was sitting with his community, with his companions, and he was explaining to them the fact that the end of time would come upon our community. In order to explain to them how close the end of time actually was, the Prophet ﷺ gave them an example. And he explained that the time of the world is divided like the times of the prayers are divided in a day. So you can imagine that the sunrise is the beginning of creation and the sunset is the end of creation, just to give an example. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he began to explain how these divisions, they actually occur and how they relate to the end of time. So in this particular case, the Prophet ﷺ explained that their initial communities that came, the initial prophets that came, they came for periods of time. For example, the community of Musa ﷺ came for a certain period of time, and that was a very long period of time. Then the community of Isa ﷺ came, and they came for a period of time. And then the community of the Prophet ﷺ came, and the Prophet ﷺ explained that this time, the time from Asr until the time when the sun sets, the time between Asr until the time of Maghrib, that short period of time is a similitude for the time in our community as well. Meaning, when it's, I'll just give you an example, the best example, when you're fasting in the month of Ramadan, and Ramadan is obviously coming upon us, and you pray the Asr prayer, once you pray the Asr prayer, people begin to do what? They begin to prepare for iftar. Because they say that we just prayed the Asr prayer, and now there's just very little time before Maghrib is going to come upon us. So they see, human beings, we as a community, we see this time as very, very short. We know that once the Asr prayer is prayed, the Maghrib prayer is just about to occur. It's not very far away. So in the same way, when you think about the whole creation, the whole existence of creation, and you think about its existence from Fajr until Maghrib, then our similitude, the coming of the Prophet ﷺ was like the coming of Asr. And the end of time is like the coming of Maghrib. Now, you think about it, the Prophet ﷺ came how many hundreds of years ago? Not hundreds, thousands of years ago, right? 1400 years ago. So if we're thinking about how close we are to the actual end of time, subhanAllah, it can't be that far away. And the longer we exist and the further we move away from the time of Rasulullah ﷺ, the more it becomes imperative upon the community to recognize that that time is near. Now, why do you have to recognize that time is near? Because in that end of time, there will be certain challenges. And if you're not understanding of those challenges, you will never be able to make the sacrifice for those challenges. Now, so what are some of the challenges that will arise? In the end of time, people of true Iman will be separated from people of just Iman for name. Because they will be required to do certain things, and when they're required to do those things, they won't be able to do it unless they had true Iman. For example, you know that towards the end of time, what will happen is that the deen will very, very quickly begin to disappear. And the only bastion of safety will be Mecca and Medina, in particular Mecca Sharif. And the believers will begin to flock towards Mecca Sharif, because they'll know that that's the only place they can preserve their deen. Now you think about it, how many of us, let's just say that tomorrow that circumstance arose, how many of us would actually have the tawfiq to be able to get up and leave everything and say, I have to now move to Mecca? We wouldn't be able to do it. We would say, wait a minute, what about my job? Wait a minute, What about my paycheck? What about my kid's education? My son just got into college yesterday. What are you talking about? We'll worry about this in a couple years. There won't be any time for that. People will have to make a decision, and it will come very quickly upon us. Nobody knows when it will come, but it will certainly come upon us. And we don't know if we'll be there, but it's not that far away. It's not out of the realm of imagination. I was sitting with Shaykh Zulfikar one time, and somebody came to him and they said, I'm thinking about doing something that was a very long-term project. I don't know, maybe he said he was thinking about, buying a large house somewhere, or getting himself into some very, very, very long-term type of business contract, whatever it might have been. It wasn't a business contract, but it was a purchase that was I don't remember what it was, but it was going to take a very long time for that person to be able to extricate themselves from that, and it was really going to require a tremendous degree of involvement. So then Shaykh Zulfikar looked at him and said that, what will you do if you have to leave it? What will you do if you have to leave it? So he said, what do you mean? He said, well, what if someday some need arises and you have to leave it? Then the person was quiet because he hadn't computed that in his mind. He hadn't thought about that. In his mind, this was going to be his goal. This was his focus. This is where his energy was going to be. So then I looked at Shaykh Zulfikar because I kind of understood what he was getting at, or at least I thought I did. So I said that, Hazrat, should we not make any long-term plans, because is it that time is that short that we don't know when we'll have to give up everything, and for example, let's say the Mahdi comes or something, and we have to go and we have to basically obey him when he comes. So then Shaykh Zulfikar basically said, look, you have to understand one thing. Nobody knows when the Mahdi will come. Now the Mahdi is the person who's rightly guided, who will come towards the end of time and who will unify the Muslims and will bring just rule and righteousness within the earth, and will actually be among the people who will battle with the Dajjal, who will be like the major force of evil at that time. So, the people will be divided into two groups. The people will be with the Mahdi, and then there will be the people against the Mahdi. So Shaykh Zulfikar, he said, look, let me just tell you very clearly, nobody can say when the Mahdi will come. Now, people like to say it's going to be 2012, 2013. Everybody has their own guess. Nobody can say when the Mahdi will come. He looked at me very straight in the eye and he said this. He said, that much is clear. But at the same time, nobody can say that he's not going to come. Yani, if you're a believer, you know he's coming, right? You know that there's going to come this day when the Dajjal, which will be the pinnacle of evil, death, destruction, will basically be standing there. And there will come a force that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise against that, that person, and that will be the Imam Mahdi, and that will be Mahdi, right? And will be the people who will be with the Mahdi. So he said, we don't know when it's coming, but we know it's coming. So he said that if you know that something major is coming and you don't know when, then what would be the best thing you could do? The best thing you could do would be to prepare for it. Be ready for it. Yani, be ready for it. So if you're going to be ready for it, that means that you have to have a certain degree of flexibility and freedom in the decisions that you make. You can't be tied down into something. You can't be so caught up in your life that when it comes time, you got 20 different things that you have to think about before you can actually go and do what you need to do. I mean, imagine if you were living at the time when the Prophet ﷺ was sent with his message, okay? Now, if you were living at the time when the Prophet ﷺ was sent with his message, and he began to call people towards righteousness, he began to tell people that they can't engage in the transactions that they normally engage in, they can't bury their daughters alive, right? They can't do these things, and you were very established within your community, you would think twice, you would think 30 times, you would say, wait a minute, what will people think of me if I don't bury my daughter? I have such status in the community. And although it sounds ridiculous, this is how the people thought. People said, what will people think? What will I do if I have to give up my business transactions the way I'm used to doing it? What will I do if I have to give up my lifestyle the way I'm used to living it? That was one of the major things that held people from coming to the prophets whenever they were sent. People began to make excuses because they were so tied into the world that they couldn't give up what they had. Otherwise, what's the big deal? You can easily, if you have someone that's telling you the truth, and you know it's the truth, like many of the kuffar knew it was the truth, but they weren't ready to give up their lifestyle. They weren't ready to make that change. They weren't ready to accept the change because they were so entrapped in their own lives. So Shaykh Zulfikar basically said, he looked at us and he said that, look, Nobody knows when this would happen. Nobody knows. Everybody knows that it will happen. So the only thing left for us to do is to prepare. Is to be prepared. Yani, not be prepared in the sense that you have to sit and wait every moment, but at least keep yourself ready to some extent. So this is something that all of us should bear in mind. We should all bear in mind that we cannot get ourselves too caught up in the life of this world, because if the challenge to serve the deen arises, we have to be ready to give ourselves to that, our time, our energy, our efforts, etc. Now you think about it, who is going to be ready to do it on that day? It's not going to be that somebody was totally caught up in dunya. Day and night they're just focused on dunya and themselves, and they're thinking about nothing around them, and they're going to be ready to make any sacrifice. They won't be able to do it. But the people who are already serving, the people who are serving the deen, striving in the deen, developing themselves in deen, these are the people that Allah will give the tawfiq to do this to. To be able to make that sacrifice, to be able to say, yes, this is where I need to put my time, this is where I need to put my effort. And of course, that will be a very, very big blessing. The Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned among the people who will have the highest ranks in Jannah, one of the people, when the Dajjal will come, he will go to the Dajjal and he will say that, you are the Dajjal, and we are the one, and you are the one that the Prophet ﷺ warned me against. He will openly go there and confront the Dajjal. So the Dajjal will take his sword and separate that person in half. And then bring that person back to life again. Because this is one of the powers that the Dajjal will have. He'll be able to bring people out of, he'll be able to do these things that you wouldn't deem possible. That's one of the ways that he'll convince people of his evilness. So he'll separate this person, bring them back to life, and say, now what do you think about me? In the most scary form. And then the person will say, I'm even more certain. I'm even more certain that you're the Dajjal that the Prophet ﷺ warned about, because this is exactly what we were told would happen. Just imagine what kind of person that could be. And the Prophet ﷺ gave glad tidings to that person. But of course, that person couldn't be too caught up. If the person is thinking 30 times, what about my business? Who's going to run my business today? What about my partnership? If I leave here, I'm going to lose all my income. What about my all the wealth that I built up? I've got all these retirement accounts. If I have very, very big retirement account, then what am I going to do with this? Then that person will never be able to extricate themselves from the life of this world. And of course, that's just one sign. The real sign will be on the Day of Judgment. But we should be amongst those people who are not too caught up in this world. Because if we get too caught up in this world, it's very hard to serve deen. We make 30 excuses in our mind. It'll be almost impossible. And you can just imagine, this is the golden opportunity. We all sit and say, I wish I lived during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I wished I lived at the time. If I lived at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, I would have been also like that. Well, your chance may come. But certainly you won't be able to take advantage of that opportunity if you're totally caught up. Another thing that Shaykh Zulfikar was talking about when he was discussing this issue was that one of the things that people will have a sense of at that time is that all the value that people had will actually dissipate. For example, we know that some of the signs of the end of time, one of the signs of the end of time, that the technology that people are dependent on, that technology will fail, resulting in chaos. I don't want to say technology, but the organization that people are used to, that organization will fail, and it will result in massive chaos. Now, you think about it, the more you live in this day and age, the more you realize that were the internet to go down, right, and all of these data stores to go down, the world would be in absolute chaos. It would be nuts, because think about it for a second. Everybody saves up money, right? You have this much in your bank account. So you say to yourself, I have $80,000 in my retirement account. It's not anything though. It's just a bunch of bits of data. You know what I'm saying? It's all stored in servers. Your name and then what is related to you is all stored in a server. It's just a bunch of data connected to your name. Nobody has that cash, tangible. When you move money around, nobody's carrying $80,000 and putting it here and putting it here. They're just assigning you names and backing it up with, sometimes not even really backing it up, but at least theoretically backing it up with some sort of currency behind it. Even when people buy stock. When people buy stocks in companies and they're transacting stocks, nobody's taking the paper and handing it to the next guy. Everything's done electronically and just digital. It's just a piece of data being attached here and then attached here. Just imagine if something were to happen and all this data were to dissipate, people would go crazy. You know how nuts people would go? Because everything that was attributed to them and who they were all disappears. And everyone would then run to try to attain all of this that didn't even exist. And eventually what would happen, they call that the economic Armageddon, what would happen is that people would realize that the whole thing is just a facade. And it is a facade because how much gold is there to really back up all the currency that the government prints? There is no gold. They just print based on their own faith. I mean, you read the dollar, the dollar bills that were given, it's in the faith of the United States. You're just basically, everybody's putting their faith into this paper, which is not actually backed up by anything. So the only value it has is that the fact that everybody thinks it has value, right? The only value that the dollar has is that everybody assumes in its mind that it's valuable, in their mind. But it's supposed to be backed up by gold. It used to be backed up by gold. It's no longer backed up by anything. Very, very, very little relative to the amount that's actually printed is actually backed up by anything. Now what happens if all of this, that quote-unquote faith disappears? I mean, that every culture and every culture and every empire comes and goes. History is full of empires rising and falling. What if the empire that people had so much faith in falls? Then what happens? It's just chaos. It'll be nuts. Because there was no value. So one of the things that people say that you should do, and I've heard many scholars say this, especially the Mashaykh, they say everybody should keep a little gold. Everybody, and I mean, forget about the Mashaykh. In this day and age, even the economic advisors say the same thing. I mean, you have people talking about economic Armageddon and they're hoarding gold. They're buying gold, and keeping a certain amount of gold with them because they say you never know what could happen. You never know what happens if the dollar becomes totally, absolutely worthless, which is a possibility. But especially in that day, let's just say that the end of earth, end of time were to come, not the end of earth, but the end of time in the sense that towards the end of this time of the community, the only thing that may have value on that day would be gold or silver or the things that were established from long ago. We know that gold and silver will always have value. How do we know that? Because in Jannah, we're told about how things are made of gold and silver, right? So gold and silver will always have value. It will always have value because there's no way that it would be that we would see something not have value but be so established as valuable by the Sharia, right? So we know that the Sharia is establishing gold and silver as valuable. It will always be valuable. But how many of us can say that we have, put away a little bit of gold or a little bit of silver thinking that, there may come a day when I need this? People don't do it. People don't think about it. Yet, the person who's prepared is the one that comes out ahead. Look at the example of Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. Okay? Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anh wasn't sure if the Prophet ﷺ would ever move from Mecca to Medina. He knew how much the Prophet ﷺ loved Mecca Sharif. He knew that the Prophet ﷺ, this was his home, he loved this land, and he was going to stay in this land. But he had in the back of his mind an idea that maybe there'll be a hijrah to Medina. Maybe. It was not definite, maybe. So what did he do? He bought animals, he prepared them, he started thinking, he started planning. He had everything set. He didn't know it was coming, but he had everything set. One day the Prophet ﷺ came and explained that this was going to happen, and then Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he just said, I want your companionship. Forget about it. I know, I got my businesses, I've got my transactions. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh was a very established person in Mecca Sharif. He had a lot of things going for him there. But when it came time to make the hijrah, he was prepared and ready and sincere. And so he became the companion of the Prophet ﷺ on the most important journey that he took on this planet. I mean, look how much arises from that one journey. Right? I mean, the Islamic calendar begins from that journey. The Islamic community thrives from that journey. A piece of Jannah on earth develops from that journey. Yani the piece of land between the grave of the Prophet ﷺ and his mimbar becomes a piece of Jannah. It's not a small thing. Yet Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, Hazrat Abu Bakr was prepared for it. He had prepared animals. He had prepared his family. He had thought that, when this comes, we're going to go this way. We're going to do this. We're going to avoid difficulty this way. I'm going to take care of Rasulullah ﷺ in this way. And he was just begging to have the opportunity. How many people are sitting here begging to have the opportunity to serve the deen? Whatever it might be. I mean, a lot of times things come up to serve the deen. It could come today that, we come up with a situation where we say, there's no more room in the masjid, we need to double the masjid. It could happen. So how many of us are going to say, we were ready, I was preparing for it, here, I sold my house, here's the money? No, people will think 30 times. Wait a minute, I got to pay for college, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. Here's my extra. But that wasn't the sign of the people who believed. The sign of the people who believed was that they took all of their requirements and put them secondary and said, whatever is necessary for the deen at any given juncture, that's what I'm going to give to it. And I'm not going to worry about, yes, they have to take care of their families, there's no doubt about it, but I'm not going to worry about my desires, right? I'm not saying needs, I'm saying desires. I'm not going to worry about my desires, I'm going to fulfill the needs of the deen. And these needs exist all the time. There's needs to develop people in the community so that they can perpetuate the deen. There's a need to have our children study the deen. There's a need to establish the institutions that are propagating deen. These all fall on our shoulders. These are our opportunities. Now, you know what the biggest deception is? People sit and say, if I was alive at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, then I would have done this. That's shaitan. That's not any kind of righteousness. That's how you make excuses. You don't look at the challenges in front. You assume, there's no challenge today. I don't have to worry about the challenges today. If I was alive, I would have done this, but since I'm not there, I don't have to do it, so I'm just going to worry about myself now. That's deception. That's the deception that shaitan raises in our minds. Actually, that's not the way you look at life. You don't look at, if I was there, then I would have. You look at life by saying, what do I need to do today? What are the things that I need to do to establish this nascent community within the area that we live in? And there are so many needs for the community. The community is constantly begging for money, begging for individuals to put in time, begging for effort, begging for sincerity. And this is an opportunity. It may be that today's effort to establish the deen may result in a great community 100 years from now that exemplifies the deen in every way and is sitting in the middle of Chicago. So who will be the ones that will be getting the reward for that? The people who took their time, who sacrificed, who struggled, who came to the masjid, who prayed in the masjid, who formed a community in the masjid, who donated to the masjid, who helped to establish the masjid, etc. So we have to be people who are constantly serving the deen and taking advantage of the opportunities that exist before us. We don't live in the past, we don't live in the future. And we're not sitting and saying, well, when, people love to have this discussion. Oh, when is the Mahdi coming? Oh, when is the Day of Judgment? But that's not the challenge. The challenge is what sits in front of you. And nor is it the challenge to sit and look in the past and say, oh, if Imam Bukhari was alive today, brother, wallahi, I would go and study with him. Wallahi, I would go and study with him. What are you talking about? Wallahi, go and study. What do you have to wait? When is the time machine going to take you back to the time of Imam Bukhari? Rahmatullah alayhi. That's ridiculous. These are excuses that human beings make. You have to take advantage of your time. You're not living in the past, you're not living in the future. But the point is that if we get too attached to the dunya, it would be impossible for you to give it up. It would be impossible. And when it's impossible, that's a problem because there may be a challenge. Today it's an option. You can donate to the masjid, you don't have to donate to the masjid. That's called, there's a relative flexibility there. But tomorrow that may not exist. Tomorrow there may come an absolute need, and that need would clearly define the believer from the non-believer. Then what do? That's the end of time. Those are the signs of end of time. And, the signs of the end of time are so rapidly coming upon us. It's just amazing. It's amazing how fast they're coming. So we should be very particular about making ourselves among those who are serving the deen. And making ourselves among those who are not too tied to this life. Yes, we have to swim in the water. That the dunya is the water, we have to swim in the water. There's no way around it. But we don't have to drink the water while we're in it, because we'll drown. And we've given that example many times before. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to be among those who take advantage of the opportunities before them. And may He make us among those who are prepared for those unique challenges that lie before us. Wa akhiru ta'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.